Welcome to Film Strip. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
And I'm Anthony from Tis the Podcast.
And we're reviewing Knives Out, starring Ana de Armas, Daniel Craig, Lakeith Stanfield, Chris Evans, Jamie Lee Curtis, Michael Shannon, Don Johnson, Toni Collette, Catherine Langford, Jaden Martell, Noah Segan, and Christopher Plummer. Written and directed by Rian Johnson. Released in 2019 on a $40 million budget. Grossed $311 million at the box office and is still a top hit on Amazon Prime today. Anthony, first off, welcome back to Film Strip. Tell folks a little bit about Tis the Podcast and all the cool stuff y'all got going on.
Well, thanks for having me back, first of all. It's always a pleasure to be here. Always fun. Tis the Podcast is a year-round Christmas podcast in which me and my co-hosts discuss Christmas movies, television specials, television episodes all year round and rank them on a Christmas canon list that is becoming more and more obscene when you look at it the longer we go on.
Yes, quite an active Reddit y'all have too, where people can keep up with that and Facebook page and everything. But I had a chance to be on the show with you and your co-host a couple times. We've had y'all on this one, so always fun to check it out, and do recommend folks check out Tis the Podcast because it's not just like the straight traditional Christmas movies. You guys will do the secret Christmas movie and the is it a Christmas movie, and then sometimes on your Patreon you just talk about whatever.
Oh, yeah, Patreons, no holds barred. We'll talk about anything. But, yeah, especially 4 years into the show now, like the main show, we're getting more and more into the, it's set at Christmas. That counts, right?
Exactly. So, well, we're going to do Knives Out here, and you actually brought this one up. You said, hey, let's do this. So background with Knives Out, why this movie?
Okay, that's an excellent question. So my background with this one. I saw this film in theaters with my wife and her cousin when she was in town visiting. And I went into this one completely blind. I saw no trailer. I think I saw a poster and I was impressed by the cast list. And all I knew was it was getting really great reviews. I was like, let's see it. It's raining. And I remember sitting there the whole time in the theater being really into it. And I was like, it was a fun experience. And I remember enjoying it. Did I enjoy it while rewatching for the show today? We shall see.
Yeah, I waited till this one hit Prime. I had seen the trailers, and it just was at a time when I didn't have a ton of time to catch something in a theater. So I waited to see it when it came on Prime. And then I had to go back and revisit it for this review. And I was like, what do I remember about this movie? I kind of remember some of it because it's really convoluted. I saw this in the wake of all the hate Rian Johnson got from The Last Jedi, which,
Last Jedi,
I gave some of it too. It's in the archives here. People can go listen to me and Nick and Kurt.
Fun episode.
We can pick apart some of what we didn't like about it. I've softened on that one a little bit. I think mostly because the last Star Wars was so bad. But anyway, Rian Johnson, though, is somebody I like, though, because I thought Looper was a really smart movie. And I think his writing and direction is smart. And the fact that he wanted to do a throwback to like Murder on the Orient Express, Agatha Christie, Mousetrap. Like I'm a sucker for all that stuff. Any kind of a whodunit. It's why I like the Scream movies because they're all whodunits, for better or worse. and I like that kind of thing. And I looked at this cast and I was like, this is the kind of thing Blumhouse does with the cast. You get people to work for scale, you give them points on the back end, and you spend all your money on the set and on the fun, and that's exactly what happened here. And obviously it was a huge hit. They're making another one. They're going to try to make a TV thing out of it. Who knows, right? But I was suckered for this because just the cast alone was enough, because I had seen Daniel Craig do a bad like Southern accent in Logan Lucky, and I love that movie. And I kind of feel like Rian Johnson owes a lot of his quirkiness to Steven Soderbergh anyway. So they're like kin to me. So I was game for this when it happened.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say about the cast too. Like before we even get into the plot, whatever we think of this movie, the cast looks like they're having the time of their lives. They look like they're having so much fun in this film.
Oh yeah, I mean, everybody here is on a different level of stuff. Anna de Armas is really kind of making her way in Hollywood at this point. Was a star making vehicle for her. Lakeith Stanfield's been in all kinds of stuff. You don't know that name, but you know that face, and you've seen him. And then of course you've got Chris Evans playing totally against type, which is fun to see the Avengers do. Jamie Lee Curtis is always fun, no matter what she does. And you talk about an actor that has had such a career and has been so many things, but anytime she can be like a little bit petty and a little comedy, I'm down, because she does that so well. Michael Shannon could be anything. And you can either love him or hate him, and he's good. Don Johnson is still around. I don't know how that guy survived the Miami Vice, but okay. I'm there. Noah Sagan, I only know him because he's in Ryan Johnson movies, but apparently he's a really good actor. He does a lot of theater and stuff like that. Toni Collette could act the phone book for me, and I would just watch it because I love her.
She is amazing.
Yes, such a varied performer.
Yeah, and despite the fact she's in tons of stuff, I still feel she's so underrated by general audiences.
Completely underrated. Catherine Langford stole everybody's heart in 13 Reasons Why, which is a very problematic show in a lot of ways, but she's amazing in it. And you wouldn't know she's Australian. This is the thing, like Americans fake accents and we suck at it. Everybody else comes over here and you'd never know. But anyway, then you got Jaden Martell, who's hot off of It and who barely talks in this movie. And then Christopher Plummer, who's only been around long enough to have been a bad guy in like James Bond movies and Star Trek movies. And he's won a Tony and an Oscar, and he's just done everything. So you get all of that in one big pile in Boston without leaning into the Boston part of it, which is something I appreciate, because as I'm not a New Yorker, you are, but I love New York. It's my favorite big city, and therefore I have to have a blood feud with Boston no matter what.
I mean, if they leaned into the Boston aspect, this would definitely come in a popcorn rating lower for me, at least.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, if you put a Wahlberg in this, I'm out. Like, I love those guys, but no, like I'm not doing that. You bring Donnie and Mark in, that's too much. But I saw all of this, and again, I said, okay, this is going to be a lot of fun, and it was, but it's so convoluted, it's hard to remember it. And so when I honestly, like, Ron and I worked real hard on the plot summaries here to try to refine those. And if you go back way back in the archives, those used to be really long and they took like 5 minutes for everybody. And thankfully, John Jansen and Kurt, who was on the show, said, we should really just shorten those and just blow it all real quick.
So I've been going back through your archives and listening to a bunch of old episodes. Like, your older plot synopsises used to hit every point in the movie. Like, yeah, we used to hit all of it. And honestly, as Brian and I got better at doing them on the Art of Slaying, film strips got better. So we finally got them down. And Anthony, I wrote so many things, and it started to get into like pages. And I finally said, screw it, I'm going to write 5 sentences and we'll just get into it. So here's the plot summary. Look, it's very convoluted. Just trust me on this. Harlan Thrombey is super rich, and he does actually kill himself because he's protecting his nurse, Marta, who thinks she overdosed him, only she didn't. His grandson, Ransom, tries to frame her for it, but the private detective he hired to help back him up, Bernard Blanc, ain't having it. And in the end, he, Marta, and the police get Ransom to confess to everything that he's done. And, Harlan left Marta his entire fortune. We'll get there. I can only tell you that because this movie is a whodunit. So obviously, spoilers hot. I hope you had seen it at least. There's so much to talk about how they get in and out of it. And that's the fun part of this movie. And the thing about whodunits, just in general, to start with that, is once you know the twist, once you've seen Usual Suspects and you've seen all of it, the joy is, can I go back and relive that and have any fun with it? Or the Scream movies, even since I dropped them earlier. Can you go back and go, when was it Billy? When was it Stu? When was it Mrs. Loomis? All those things. And the good ones, the story is so fun. The characters are so fun. You don't care about not knowing that the twist now. The bad ones, though, it ruins it for you. So it's like, is there rewatchability to this? And the problem with this movie, I guess it's not problem, but the puzzle of this movie for me, Anthony, is when you watch it, it almost self-erases itself for you.
because it gives you information, then changes that information in the next scene. So you're constantly going, wait a minute, who was that? And I watched this with my wife who hadn't seen it before. And she was sitting there going, no, wait a minute, who's that again? And it was a lot of stuff thrown at you in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And like, I remember the first time I saw this sitting down to watch it, like, you're about 15 minutes in, you find out, Marta thinks she's overdosing Harlan, and then he kills himself. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, cool. We know from the beginning, there's not going to be a mystery about who killed him. It's going to be a cover up here. And then they add in all these convoluted elements and like start showing us different scenes from different points of views and perspectives. And it's like, it's a lot. You have to really pay attention to this movie. It's not one you can turn your brain off or be lost in your phone during.
Oh yeah, totally. At one point I was like, I put my phone down to make sure I was paying attention. And I told my wife, I said, trust me, just put your phone down, because if you're trying to do that, and you will lose yourself on this movie. And in some ways it's nice to have a movie like that asks you to say, just don't worry about all that for the next 2 hours. Let me take you on a ride. It's another thing for that movie to actually deliver on all of that. And I dropped Soderbergh earlier. I think he is really good at doing that kind of thing. Like Unsane is a really disturbing film, but it makes you just want to, enthrall in it. And then something like Logan Lucky, which is like Ocean's 11, the redneck version.
Yeah,
like you just gotta watch it. You gotta watch these people pull that off, and it's amazing.
You and Ron had recommended that one to me, and I watched it like the next weekend, and that was such a good movie. It's such a good call. Yeah,
just another one of those that kind of flew under, and didn't do like this one did. But it was it's a big critically acclaimed thing. And the thing about this movie, I think that makes it work, at least for me, is that I know all these people in this cast from something. And some of them have played such iconic roles. Like Don Johnson and Jamie Lee Curtis have played things that still last today. Being Sonny Crockett and Laurie Strode are part of pop culture lexicon that if you've never seen Halloween or Miami Vice, you know who they are. They are just part of it. And then you've got character actors surrounding them. Toni Collette plays everything. And you're like, oh, I remember her. She was the crazy person in Hereditary. She's also the put-upon mom in the way back. And then she was this. And she was, all the stuff she's in, right? And you're like, is that Captain America? That's Captain America. He's kind of playing an asshole. I kind of like him. And like there's that. And again, you see all these people. And then Michael Shannon shows up and you're like, is that Zod? Is that the bad general from The Shape of Water? Man, he's kind of a jerk, but he's actually kind of a good actor. You get to watch people do things. And I think what Rian Johnson is good at, if he's good at anything, is writing dialogue for characters and then letting them go with it. And it's almost like a play in a lot of ways. This movie has some pretty cool sets and stuff, and that big house is gorgeous and everything, but it's not a tour de force through Boston. He doesn't really live in the location. It's more about that's just the stage and all the pretty stuff to look at in the background. But what you're supposed to pay attention to is that face that is talking at the moment.
I think this could very easily be, with some tweaks, be turned into a stage play, like a 2-act, just one room play with a few tweaks. Like to your point, it's not a tour around Boston. They have that set piece where they're investigating later on in the film. They're driving around to different abandoned locations, trying to figure out the clues. But I feel like that could easily be reworked for the stage, and it would work well on the stage. Like you said, he's great at dialogue, and we'll get to when we dive further into this film, we'll talk about my favorite scene, but it was just all talking. And one of the things that I really liked about this film was these people felt real to me. So the area of New York I grew up in, you could kind of call it like upper middle class, but you're bordered by like these really upper class people. So I went to school with some of these kids who came from families like this. And oh man, did this family ring true to me from when I went to their houses and stuff. Like, yeah.
I can only imagine, man. That is so cool to hear. I guess let's get into it. Let's talk about the Thrombys as a family, because I think it's neat to sort of, it's almost like Family Feud. Like, let's put everybody in a place. Harlan Thrombey is Christopher Plummer, and he has such a gravitas when he's on screen and such a presence that I can believe he's anything. And what they've played him off as if he is, I don't know, some cross between Agatha Christie and like Tom Clancy and Stephen King and, all these mystery writers, Dean Koontz, one of those, or Clive Cussler. Like, he's got all these books, right? And he's just made a fortune out of this. And this all centers around the fact that it's his 85th birthday. And he has chosen this night to cut everybody out of the will, which is always a fun rich person trope, right? To think about. But just him as a character, and he's not on screen that much, even in flashbacks. They don't use him a ton because, again, he is quite old, and I'm sure he can't work that much.
But he is a presence, though, despite that.
When you know him, like, he just looms over this whole thing, and they have that big oil painting of him in the I guess the hallway or whatever of the house, leading out to one of the viewing decks. And that looms as large as him actually being there. And it's almost like, well, we can't have Chris here much, but we're going to have this huge friggin' painting that we're going to commission of him. And it's just going to loom over. And I'm looking at that and I'm like having flashbacks to like The Ghost and Mr. Chicken and all these old, like, classic horror movies, or the Haunting and all that kind of stuff. There's always
Dorian Gray.
Yes, exactly. But he has got this whole persona about him. And the thing is, like, on one level, you should absolutely hate him because he's awful. But on the other hand, he's actually doing the most noble thing he's ever done in his life when he makes these choices about cutting his family out of his will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I expected to hate him, but that first extended scene you get with him and Marta, where they're playing the game and just talking back and going back and forth at one another, I loved him. He's funny. He's personable. He's charismatic. It's clear why you see Marta finding out about his death. I think she would have been just as devastated if she hadn't thought she killed him, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Like, you can tell she's as ingrained in his life as anything else. We'll get to her in a bit. But yeah, he's got such a cool presence. And the way we meet the rest of the family is through the interrogation pieces. And we can get into that in a bit, but we got to talk about him. Like, Jamie Lee Curtis plays his oldest daughter, Linda, who in some ways he's kind of already cut off, but also he hasn't. Like, she started her own business from the ground up with $1 million loan from dad, but whatever, she had to pay it back, so like she's got her own thing. And you sort of respect her for that. It's like she made something out of herself. And I don't know, Jamie Lee Curtis always seems to play that kind of character anyway. And I bought it. I'm like, yes, you have done this.
She definitely seems the most intelligent out of all the children in this family. Like, she definitely inherited his brains.
Yes, clearly. Yeah, she got his like drive to continue to succeed and do well. And she's got her husband, Don Johnson, who's, I don't know what he does other than hang out with his wife and cheat on her. Like, that's his whole thing. But that's the twist of them, is that I know Richard's cheating on you, and your son is also a horrible human being. And that's who Chris Evans plays, Hugh Ransom. And I'm like, I grew up in the South, so tell me, do people name their children this like pretentious shit like this? Because it's hilarious to me to see it in movies like this.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I have known people with crazy names like that, or the names that are like really last names, but they're using them as first names. And so, again, ring true to me. But Chris Evans is so good in this role.
Yes.
And after years of him as Captain America, like, this harked back to in his early days, just starting out, when he played Johnny Storm in Fantastic Four. He played a bit of a dick. Yes. Not another teen movie. He played the stereotypical jock. Like,
yes, I was thinking not another teen movie. I was like, he is dialing that schmaltzy, cheesy thing back up, and it's hilarious.
And I can only think after, what's it been, 10 years of playing Captain America, he must have had a blast leaning into the awful side of the human psyche.
Yeah, because even in the movies he's done outside of the Avengers universe, like, he's played these kind of dark characters. And I mean, he's, I've seen him in movies that are really like dramatic and all this, or these big action movies and stuff. And then just to get to do this little part where all he does is smirk on the screen the whole time. I thought he was a blast. And yes, Don Johnson and Jamie Lee Curtis, if they had a kid, would probably act and look a lot like Chris Evans.
Yep. And I do want to say about Don Johnson's character too. Like, I loved so the interrogation scenes, that's just how we meet them, and they're going, switching back and forth between each of their perspectives. Jamie Lee Curtis is is too smart to buy into their tricks to like reveal secrets about her family. Don Johnson just spills it all. Like, oh yeah, he's horrible. They got into a fight. Oh, he's a literal Nazi. Like, made me laugh so much.
Yes, yeah, because he's just like, whatever. I'll tell, sure, whatever. I call it the Jar Jar Binksing of the character. It's like, I give up, sure, whatever, whatever you need. And I mean, he wasn't the one that invented it, but it felt the same way. So,
yep.
Yeah, but you have them as a unit. Then you've got his son Walt, which is played by Michael Shannon, who Michael Shannon is such a big person anyway, even beyond Hollywood standards. He's legitimately a tall presence, and he's got this big voice, but he plays these characters where he can just be really kind of mousy, which is just the range of him as an actor. And he's got this sort of scraggly beard. He's sort of this ex-hippie kind of person or whatever. He's got a wife, Ricky Lincombe, who's hilarious, just sort of standing there bug-eyed the whole time. And his son, who's always on his phone, which perfect to type, they got that. But his whole thing is he has curated his dad's legacy. And he's just got it down to a science. And, we're just going to keep this going into ebooks next, Dad, and all this stuff, but he's never done anything on his own. And, I know people like that who they've done great stuff and they followed the family biz and they've kept it going. And that's great. But I always wonder, like, did you ever do anything on your own?
Right.
And you hear him talk sometimes, like my dad used to say, like, you need to do something on your own. And that's Walt's whole thing, is he doesn't do anything on his own.
Yeah, and Walt is, so Michael Shannon's character thinks he has actual more control at this company than he actually does, because he really wants to get into the film division, sell the rights to Netflix and things like this, and Harlan's having none of it. So right there, it's established motive. Like, why would you want to kill this guy? Well, you want to kind of run the company and make even more money by selling the rights to this empire to the movie studios. And something else about his character, I guess he's disabled. He walks with a cane.
Well, he's got a cast on his leg all the time.
Oh, okay.
So I thought, like, I can relate as someone who's quite clumsy and often injures myself. That I'm like, this is this big guy. He's kind of an oaf. And he just hurts himself all the time. But that gives his character like a crutch, right? Because that's the thing we should say. Like, everybody's motive to kill these people. Linda's would be that he never gave me, anything, and I had to do it all on my own. Walt's would be that I want more control than Dad will give me, right? Like, that's the bit. And I think the physically that he walks with a cane and stuff lets you know he's being propped up by something else. He's not doing it on his own. That's what that's supposed to be.
Yeah, that's great. That works really well. And it also makes him a little less intimidating for his size, so that when he confronts Martyr later on in that back alley, you realize it's like you're taking it back, like, oh, this guy is actually dangerous, despite the fact like he's quote unquote disabled at the moment because of the cane.
Right. Yeah, you forget how big he is because he plays so small. It's an acting feat in itself. Then you got daughter-in-law Joni. This is Toni Collette's character. Her husband was the other son who passed away. We don't really know much about him, but she is very much like, you can tell they met at like a Lollapalooza concert or something. She's like this pseudo hippie. Like, she's not old enough to be a real hippie, but she kind of is. And she's just sort of into, whatever philosophy of the week. And she's kind of an airhead or whatever. And she's got a daughter played by Catherine Langford, who's like the classic trope of the completely useless liberal arts degree seeking student, right? And their whole thing is that Joni's been double dipping on the tuition from Harlan, and he finds out, and so that would be her motive. But the thing about her and particularly the daughter in this, I never suspected them once for anything before the movie reveals itself, because she's so ditzy and plays so ditzy that this woman probably can't figure out what tomorrow is, much less how to kill somebody in all this convoluted way. But I loved her because she was so fun, and I knew people even where I grew up that were like this, and their kids were like Meg, and I was like, oh God, I'm having flashbacks here.
Yeah. I never suspected them at all, and I liked the contrast she proved to the rest of the Harlan's children. Like, she was the aloof, fun one, like the in-law, and you got the impression, like Jamie Lee Curtis's character especially, that the minute that Harlan died, like this woman's getting cut off from the rest of the family because I don't want anything to do with her. And she even makes a comment about Meg at one point at the very beginning. Like, she leaves the birthday party early and she makes a comment, oh, dad's sending her to this hippie feminist school to lead into all of this stuff, and she can't even stay for birthday cake. And that made me really laugh. Like, again, anyone with a large family, rich or not, can recognize these personalities as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, my wife's family, they have a large extended family, and they all have gathered together for multiple things at different times. And it's funny to watch that dynamic, because I didn't really do that. I mean, my parents had, lots of brothers and sisters and stuff, but us all getting together was hard to do because everybody was scattered. So it was usually just the four of us. So when I married my wife and I got to hanging out with her family, it'd be like 10, 12 people sitting around grandpa's living room on, Christmas Eve talking. And I'm going, I don't know how to operate in this circle. And I would watch people, and I'm sitting there having memories of that. I'm like, okay, that's the Didsy one. That's the, that's the, and everybody's got one, right? And, there's always the in-law or the outlaw, as they say, and I don't know. I love Joni. I thought she was funny. In this, and again, Toni Collette could act the phone book for me, and I would be like, yes, that's wonderful, give you statues, because she's just such a good presence, and she's never malicious. Like, you get that she's robbing the old man. let's not belay her crime here, but she's not a bad person. It's not like you can't spare it. And she's clearly, like, you can see why her and Linda didn't get along, because Linda, even though she had a little help, did make something out of herself, right? And she can't stand her brother Walt because he's just a suck up and doesn't do anything, right? And won't do anything on his own. And this woman didn't do anything. Like, she was married to my brother. That's her only claim. Like, that's her. You can see that.
And it's a bit transparent the way she interacts with Harlan in the few scenes he's alive. Like, she's pretty much sticking around this family now for the money that he's giving her. Like, she's using him, and I think that's clear to Linda because it's clear to the audiences, and she can't stand her for it.
Yeah, and then just kind of tucked over in the corner is Harlan's mother, and I don't know who this actress was. They call her Juanita, but great Nana Thromby, just sort of sitting over in the corner like a wallflower, and I got such a kick out of her just sort of being there and not really being there at the same time. And I don't know. I thought it was funny. I mean, she was
blind as a bat to people like 2 feet in front of her.
Right. People, like this. And you can think like, oh yeah, everybody got that one family member that's, wow, you're still alive. You're 104. Good for you.
That's what makes it funny too, because you look at Christopher Plummer, who is clearly ancient himself, and his mom is still kicking in the corner. She outlives him.
I'm like, wow, like that's something you didn't think would happen. And yeah, but it's funny to see, and you got all these people running around, and then you get really our central character, Marta. And again, I don't know Anna de Armas from anything. Now, I've seen her name on stuff, but watching her in this, she has such presence and is so fun and plays someone who's innocent but also a little world weary. And we should tell her story. Like, her mom immigrated to the United States the really old-fashioned way. She snuck in, and she worked hard and had kids, and Marta has made something of herself. And the way it's said is that her mom had the kids when she was in America. So by law, Marta and her sister are U.S. citizens. But they've got to protect mom because she doesn't have the green card, and that could be a problem, right? And so, and you realize, like, this almost feels like it's 20 years too late. Like, there's a generation of people who have gone from this world now who could just scrape out a living and get by and never be noticed by any authority at all, never do anything wrong. They just pay their taxes. They just do their stuff, and you never know who the heck they are. They're just invisible to the world, and they raise kids on this. And poor Marta has taken a great gig, man. I get to take care of the richest dude in town by far. And not only that, he's nice to me. We play games, we joke with each other. His family's loony as hell, but whatever. I don't see them that much.
And he's compassionate to her situation, too.
That's the thing. Is he's not using her, and he's not patronizing to her, and that's what makes the Harlan character so much fun. Is that you would think somebody, and I'm not trying to be mean, but somebody that old that had been in those areas doesn't look at the world like that,
right?
And necessarily the fact that he sees something in her is like, you know what, you're making something of yourself. And I think honestly, he looks at his own family like, they ain't doing anything without me. You, on the other hand, did all this on your own. That's pretty good. And you can tell they really get along. It's like the daughter he never had.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. He clearly views her as family, whereas the rest of the family say they do. But then again, you get the duel and compare.
You get Don Johnson being the jingoistic asshole of all time. Like, come on, Marty, come over here and tell us what it's like to be from wherever the hell it is you're from. And I mean, it's funny that's played for comedy, but you realize, like, I have family members that talk like that, and they're just as, like, they don't mean anything by it, but oh God, incredibly racist. They just don't mean to be.
Right. And they claim to embrace her as family, but then you get Jamie Lee Curtis saying she wasn't even allowed at the funeral. Like, I wanted you there, but the rest of them didn't. And then the minute she walks away, you get John Johnson saying, well, I wanted you there, but Linda had a stick up her ass.
And in the same breath, he just hands her a plate that he's done eating off of, like, here, take care of that. It's like, okay. But that's the thing, is they all in one way or another patronize her on some level, except Harlan. He doesn't. And like, he messes with her. Like, they're playing the game. He's like, oh, there's an earthquake coming, when she's beating him, and he flips the deck over, and she's like, great.
Yeah, he kind of acted like your older grandfather, like an old grandfather to her. That was the relationship I got. Yeah,
exactly. And we should say, like, the setup is the reason she thinks she poisons him is he gets nightly medication, and he gets a little bit of morphine too to help him rest. Because at 85, whatever, why not? You can afford it, do it. And Ransom has gone in, unbeknownst to everybody at this point, and switched the labels on the bottles. And Marta thinks she injects him with 100 cc's of morphine, which that's bad.
And I'm surprised she said it would take 10 minutes to kill him, because I would have thought that would have knocked him out quick.
The fact that this man is completing sentences 2 minutes later is amazing, because I had a kidney stone once, and they gave me a little bit of morphine, and I didn't care what happened to the rest of the world. I was good.
Oh, yeah.
That was an incredible trip. And I'm like, boy, I understand why people get hooked now, because that's, wow, it's great. But what we learn is that, and I have friends who are nurses and back me up on this, she actually doesn't inject him with the wrong stuff, because based on visual acuity, the viscosity of the two liquids is so different. She doesn't even look at the bottles. She just looks at the stuff, and she realizes, oh, I've got them backwards. And she injects him with the right stuff, but she thinks she does it wrong. And that's the whole thing. And the moment when she is telling him, like, I've got to get you the antidote, and she is frantically looking for it because it comes with the kit. She can't find it, and there's big tears in her eyes, and you're like, oh, wow, like, this is heavy. And the way he plays it off, I got to ask you, I'm like, has he, like, thought, now, if one day by chance she might poison me, this is how, like, he has clearly planned out how this is going to go down in some way, even though he has no idea what's going on.
He was remarkably calm for what supposedly happened to him just then. And all I could think of is, well, he's 85. Maybe he's at the point like a lot of older people get. It's like whatever. I'm done with this world anyway.
Yeah.
But when you get to know his family more, I could think like, oh, I finally get to leave this family behind. I'm fine with his fate. But I found it interesting. Like, his immediate reaction isn't panic or stress or anything. It's like, oh, this would be a great way to kill somebody in my next mystery novel. Like, when he still thinks she has the injection to save him. He's like, oh, let me write this down. This is a great way to kill someone off. And I loved that. Like, his brain's always moving.
And that's what you learn. Like, there's so many things in his house that are homages or things that just happened that he's like, oh, I'm going to put that in the book, like this hidden entrance and all this other stuff. And you realize, like, this guy has invented so many ways for people to get killed that he's just like, well, okay, here's how we're going to get out of this. Like, he's got his own mystery novel of a life set. And the sad part is he doesn't have to die. He decides to slice his own throat, which is a gruesome way to go.
Can we talk about that? Like, who chooses that? A giant knife, too, not a switchblade. Like, it looks like an ancient ceremonial dagger that he takes and slits his own throat.
Well, completely. I mean, and he sets up like Chekhov's knife for us in dialogue, and if you blink, you miss it there. I mean, honestly, but it's this is not one of the stage knives like you see downstairs, because there's this big like room of knives and this big chair of knives, which is almost like a nicer Game of Thrones looking chair, I guess you'd say, but it's all these stage knives. And he's like, this is the real thing. And he starts playing with it a little bit. And I'm like, put the knife down, Grandpa, your skin's thin.
And he says it in reference, again, because this will come back later, to Ransom. Like when he's talking about him, he's like, this kid can't even tell the difference between a prop knife and a real knife.
Exactly. Which will play out, as we know. And the thing is Marta's scrambling. She doesn't know what to do. And he tells her, like, no, here's what we're going to do. And this all gets revealed to us. And that's what I wanted to say, is that for a little while, we don't know what happened. We're like, what went on? What's going on here? This is a big mystery. And then they reveal it to us in the second act. And Rian Johnson's like, look, I want to show you the trick now, because what's fun is not the fact that this happened. What's fun is all the ways we get to figuring this out. And that's when we haven't talked about the cops, and we need to talk about our three policemen here. You have Lieutenant Elliott, Lakeith Stanfield, who's so good. He's just playing the straight man. And that's his job. You got Trooper Wagner, who I don't know what his role here is in terms of like why you have a statey and a local detective, but sure. But he's like a super fanboy of Harlan Thrombey.
Right. And you almost get the impression the two of them together, if Benoit Blanc wasn't in the picture, he'd be the good cop to Elliot's bad cop.
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly what it is. And then you've got Daniel Craig sitting in the background, chewing scenery, flipping a coin, playing a piano, and he'll just hit a key on a piano when the conversation gets a little awry, like ding, and it's almost like that's the clue. And what's funny is you realize that he has zero jurisdiction over these people, but they are just as enthralled with him as Linda is, and everybody else that's read about him. And because he's the last of the gentleman detectives. He's from a different time before. And what you learn about him is he doesn't know why he's there either. Somebody paid him $5,000 cash to come investigate this, and he didn't even know the guy was dead at the time. And that's the mysteries. He's there to figure out who hired me. And right. I got to say that watching Daniel Craig do this performance is so fun, because again, he's clearly desperately trying to hide his accent. And I don't know if somewhere in the way, like, because they do it in Logan Lucky too, if somewhere along the way Johnson said, don't fight it. If it slips, just let it, because it'll be part of the humor. Because there's times when he's talking, it's like, yes, that's very much Eastern Tennessee, Northern Kentucky. Like I can feel it. And like, nope, you're from Great Britain. Yep. Yeah. It's like, oh, that slipped. And my wife was like, well, he sucks at this. I said, I think that's the point. I said, it's supposed to be like a little bit of everything.
It just adds to the mystery surrounding his character too, though. Like they've already announced they're going to milk this franchise for all what it's worth, like do sequels and stuff. I wonder, like, they could easily do a prequel and show us his early days too, like, and figure out more about this eccentric guy who is literally who Linda and all these people have read about. He's become so famous, I guess, and like. Even his body language, I love that it's just slumped in the chair. Like he looks kind of lazy. He's not sitting up straight. He's just sitting there. Like I want to know more about him. And Rian Johnson does such a good job of doling it out in little pieces. And even by the end, you don't know a lot, but it works for me. I love this character. I want to see more of his adventures.
What you learn about him is that he is friggin' Sherlock Holmes. Like he is noticing stuff. Because there's this one scene, it happens early on when Marta's at home with her parents again, or her mom and sister, and they're watching the news about Harlan's death, and they zoom in on her shoe, and there's this little red dot of blood. It's on it, and in the end, the last act, he tells Marta, he said, "I knew you were there when he died from the first time I met you, and I knew you didn't have anything to do with it either." And she said, well, how did you know that? And he points at her shoe, and it's like, wow, this guy notices everything. Mm-hmm. And it's fun to have a character like that who seems like more myth than he is reality, but then you see him actually get to do it. And it's so much fun. I'm with you. I want to see, just take him and give him another mystery, because it's so much fun to watch him and watch him figuring it out too. When he's talking through it, he's like bugging out in the car and his veins are popping out of his head. It's like, what the hell are you doing, man? But it's so much fun to watch.
And it's like his brain is working so fast and is so like, it's such a big brain and moves so fast. Like he's always fiddling with something, like you said, the piano or clicking a pen or throwing sticks for the dogs. Like he always has to do something it's almost like slow down the brain or just occupy himself while he's thinking, which is a good character beat. But Yeah, you said you phrased it perfectly. He's more myth than legend. And when he comes in, the way everyone reacts to him right off the bat, I bought into this. Okay, this guy's a myth. Although part of me did think like it can't be good for the private eye business that he's so famous that everyone recognizes him when they see him.
Right? Yeah, it's like if that guy shows up, like it's over. Like, he's not sneaking around taking pictures of anybody, cheating on somebody. Whoever did that for Harlan to catch Richard cheating on Linda, like, no, that wasn't him. So, and the twist about him and what's fun is that you realize Ransom hired him to come out there and find out Marta. And he was like, okay, he'll come in here and he'll figure all this out because the cops are stupid. They won't do this right. But this guy will do it, and he'll entertain my dumb family, and see if he can get them out of the way so I can get what I want and all this stuff. I mean, because it's what we should say is what Harlan is doing on his 85th birthday is slowly but surely telling each of his family members, you're done. So he starts with the grandson. And what we realize is he tells the grandson, I'm leaving all this to the nurse. and the grandson can't believe it. He's like, what? And he told Linda, you're gone. He's telling Walt, you know what? I think it's time for you to go on your own, and he's cutting them all off from one way or the other. He's told Joni, like, I know what you're doing. This is the last of the checks you're going to get from me, all that stuff. So I don't know. I thought that was neat that his plans to cut everybody off before he thinks he's poisoned. It's almost like he totally uses the fact that like, well, I just cut everybody off. Now's a good time to die. It's almost too convenient for him.
Right. It's almost one of those things like if Marta didn't supposedly mess up, was he going to like kill himself that night? Because he was like wrapping up every loose end that evening that he had in his life. Like, so it wouldn't have mattered regardless. I was almost thinking like, oh, is he just sick of life? He just wants to end it himself regardless.
No, right. Yeah. It's weird, but it's more like he realizes, no, this is perfect because they're all here. So we don't have to wait for him to get here. I'll be dead. They'll figure out real quick I killed myself. And you run out. He works out this whole thing for her about here's how you can, cover up all your tracks and what you need to do to, cover yourself. And what's funny is she realizes like she screws it up so many different ways. She breaks one of the steps. She stands there in front of grandma who thinks she's Ransom. So that works out. She realizes she made tracks in the mud, so she has to cover them up later, and that's hilarious because she's walking through them going, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. They're telling her, please don't walk over there. And
she stops a car on the wrong side of the gate that he told her to in front of the cameras.
Yep. Yeah. So that's what's funny to watch is Anna de Armas just trying to do all these things that he's laid out for her because he's only got like 5 minutes to live. So it's not like she's got a ton of time and she doesn't know what she's doing. Like that's the thing. She can't do it. And it's funny to watch her go through all these motions and stuff. And we learned something about her too. That's a big tell is that if she starts lying, she throws up. She gets physically sick from it. And that's a big plot point that they're going to play with a good bit in this movie.
Right. And when they introduced this the first time I saw it, I was thinking to myself, like, I'm not a big fan of that, like vomit, like the potty humor, for lack of a better word, which I would associate vomit with, but they do it sparingly enough and it actually has a point to it. Like it comes back in the end. She gets her own little arc with it that it worked for me. And apparently upon doing some research, this is a real condition some people have, which is, I don't know anyone like that, but okay.
I know. Yeah, me either. But I appreciated it the way that they played that for us, because what we'll learn is that Ransom kind of swings her out of the house because too much crazy going on, and he takes her to eat, sausage and beans, whatever, and he asks her like a question like, I know you'll throw up if you lie to me, because especially with what I just fed you. And so she lays it all out for him. She tells everything. And the way he plays it first is like, oh, wow, that's crazy. And what you realize is later on, it's like his whole plan just blew up in his face. He's like, oh, crap, what am I going to do now? And that's when everything kicks into overdrive. And what I like, too, is that there's another reveal later where I guess she's the maid or whatever in the house who hates Ransom, catches him coming back to swap the bottles back around again, or actually to put the antidote back in the kit so that it'll look like Marta purposely killed, the old man. And her story about I couldn't find it is bull, or whatever. Well, that poor woman Fran, played by Edie Patterson, is just like no, and we find when Marta finds her in the back of that old laundromat, like that was something out of the friggin' Conjuring, man. That was scary. Like she's just,
it was creepy.
Yeah,
it was this bug crawling on her face and everything. Like, oh man, you're 100% right. I thought that went into traditional horror fare really quick. But it was effective. Like I kept trying to put myself in poor Marta's shoes. Like a day ago, she was just this kindly old man's nurse, and now here she is, like being covering up what she thinks is an accidental murder on her part, and she's all of a sudden finding staff dying. And it was good though. It was really well done.
No, it's great. And what's fun about it is you learn later that Ransom does kill Fran and tries to set Marta up for it the same way. He drugs her with morphine, and Marta tries to save her life. And that's when you really learn that Marta is really a good person, because she could just shut up and everything will be okay, right? But she decides, screw it, I'm going to save this woman. And so she tries to save her, and that's kind of the plot point at the very end of the movie, but whether she does or not. But I don't know. I like that. I like that whole bit there too. My question for you is, did you have any idea who really did it before they finally revealed? Because I'll admit, I didn't. I didn't know who would have done it. I couldn't put it on. I just knew it wasn't Marta. I was like, well, clearly she did. She's not involved in this, but I don't know who's pulling the strings.
I did not either, because I thought Ransom would have been too obvious a choice, honestly. Like, so I didn't think it was him. My mind went to Linda. I thought as the most put together child, I thought there would have been some resentment there, and maybe she would have done it. But no, I didn't see it coming. Like, it was just a theory, and clearly I was wrong.
Yeah, I didn't know it either. And the fact that Ransom has done it, and that Marta knows it, Blanc's figured it out, and then gets the other cops in on it. That's what's fun, is that final reveal where they're getting him to talk. Well, we should talk about what really sets everybody on edge first before we get to that. They have the reading of the will. Frank Oz, who everybody's favorite Muppet, and Yoda comes in, and who can also just play these random lawyers for some reason, comes in to read the will. And what you realize is that everything gets left to Marta. And what Chris Evans puts on a performance there, just cackling, because
this is my favorite scene in the movie, because immediately when Frank Oz as a lawyer reveals this, a switch flips at this family. They don't even pretend to like her anymore. The first thing Jamie Lee Curtis's Linda does is she turns around and says, "You bitch."
Exactly.
And they start ganging up on her, like, were you sleeping with him, accusing her of all this stuff, manipulating him, sleeping with him, whatever. And the whole time, Ransom sitting in the corner, like, laughing his ass off. And it is the funniest scene in this movie for me. I loved it. So well done.
There's like 2 times when he just sets his family into chaos just to see what happens, because he tells them all to eat shit, and all this stuff. And then he does this here. And what is that he already knows this. He's just there for the theater of it and to watch the rest of them melt down. And it is a true meltdown. Like the movie takes a 30-minute diversion with them trying to go like, well, we'll just have to get her to renounce it. That's just only the right thing to do. And they like intimidate her for it and all this stuff. And it's hilarious to watch them just justify. And you realize you're watching all these 1%ers see their trust fund evaporate in front of them. They have no idea how to deal with it.
And like they chase her out of the house. And I love Ransom gets her in the car. And then he rolls down the window. This was fun. We should do it again sometime. It's so funny. I loved it.
And that's when he takes her off and she tells him everything, and all this, other stuff starts happening. But it's part of the fun is watching that all unravel and watching them completely lose their stuff. And I'm trying not to read way too much into this, but I do think Rian Johnson is trying to say something to us, is that these super rich white people, the thought of this brown person having all of this money all of a sudden for no reason that they can discern at all, that freaks them out. And then, I think he's trying to say something about that.
Yeah, I think he was definitely making some commentary there. And the whole 1% thing is very timely for nowadays, like the class warfare thing. But
Exactly.
I loved it. They were playing the whole victims. It's like when you go out, turn on CNBC during the day and see like Leon Cooperman shedding tears that they want to raise his taxes to help the lower class people in this country.
And what you realize is he's parroting all of that, because this is what people fear. Like, they're just going to take everything I've got and give it to people that don't deserve it. It's like, no, moron, no one thinks like this. It's not how that works. You know? But it is playing into that fear, right? And that's what makes it funny. That's where the comedy comes from in it. And I'll give him credit for doing that, because he did have some other like social commentary going on in Last Jedi that did not work and felt completely wrong. And it's like, well, at least you learned how to write that better, because it's in Looper too, but it's much more subtle. And in this one, I'm like, I think you've come back to your subtle ways. This is smarter. This is how you do that. And what's funny is people act like that's a new thing, Anthony. If you can watch theater and Agatha Christie stuff, and I'll specifically talk about like Mousetrap, it is all up in that. Like, that has been going on for decades. You know, that's where we get a lot of social commentary, is through art like that. And that's what I think it's fun.
I wouldn't even say decades. Like, people think it's so new. You go back to like Shakespeare's, you go centuries back, like they've been dealing with the whole social commentary, specifically class warfare and the fear of the other and the outsider. Like, it is nothing new. It's just, you know, it adapts to the times. Yeah, exactly.
It adapts to the time, and that's what makes this story so fun.
When they realize they can't sway her to relinquish basically what he left her in the will, what does Walt do? He goes to her house and not so subtly threatens, like, hey, we could call, you know, essentially immigration on your mom and get her kicked out of this country.
We wouldn't want that to happen, would we? And what's funny is he realizes he has no power, because she finally realizes, wait a minute, I've got the kind of money that can buy the lawyers that'll fix that, so you can go away. That's what's funny, is that she finally realizes she has power in that moment. And it's a neat reveal for her to realize, like, wait, I don't have to listen to your crap anymore. You know, and what's funny is all of her sisters are like, are we rich now? I don't know, maybe. You know, like, I don't know. It is fun. And there's a little behind the scene thing that I did not pick up on until I read this, but everybody's running around with Apple phones this whole movie, except Ransom. Because Apple specifically has a rule: if you're going to use our phones in a movie, it cannot be for anybody doing evil. It has to be
really,
it cannot be for the bad guy. So Ransom's got some rando android.
That's so interesting. I'm gonna keep an eye out in every movie.
Yeah, like, I usually don't lean into that kind of trivia, but I thought that is so weird to think about. I'm like, it's also weird in a movie that's saying what this movie is saying. Like, and they bowed to that. I'm like, this is gives my head hurt. So we do get to that final scene, though, where what's happening is Blanc is laying it out for how he knows Ransom's been involved in this, and Marta's doing her part too, and Ransom's denying it, and then he's kind of not denying it, and they talk about the part that we know you killed Fran, or you tried to at least, and the phone rings from the hospital where Marta took her, and she picks it up and she plays it off as like, great, that's good news, and she hangs up, and she doesn't say anything else. And Ransom's like, she's alive. Mm-hmm. You know, and in my head, I'm like, she's about to blow chunk at this dude because this woman's dead. But he does the Scooby-Doo villain thing, you know, or the James Bond villain. He's like, he tells everything. You got nothing on me. Maybe attempted murder, but I've got the kind of money that gets lawyers to get me out of this stuff. And And then she just throws up on him. And generally, I don't go for that kind of humor either. But in this moment, I was like, that was perfect. Like, the piece that read him, that was perfect.
It was such a nice payoff. Like, it had a point. It wasn't just some random character quirk. Yeah. Like, it was Chekhov's gun at the beginning, and she does it.
Yes, Chekhov's puke. And so but he knows then, oh, she's dead. And then the trooper's like, and I just recorded you saying all of that crap. So I love his whole, like, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. And he comes at her with that stage knife, and it's slow-mo, and it's all this drama. And he stabs her, and it just retracts the blade. And he's like, dang it. You know?
Which, again, Chekhov's knives. You go back to the beginning. Yep. He said in the first 10 minutes of Harlan said in the first 10 minutes of the film, like, the kid's such an idiot, he doesn't know the difference between a real knife and a fake one.
Exactly. And that's what's funny. And my wife asked, like, so what if he had grabbed the real knife? And I got to thinking about it. I looked back, and there's a scene early where you go watch him. He plays with that one knife that he picks out. Like he touches it. Apparently he's got some connection to that stage knife. I don't know what it is, but it's subtle and it's kind of hidden in there. And I'm like, I think he has always fixated on it. There, that's just the one he grabs. Otherwise, that's a real dangerous plot point. Unless all of those were fake, but who knows? One of those look like Crocodile Dundee's. I'm like, that ain't no way that retracts. So,
right.
So no, that's a real knife, and that'll do some damage on that little person that he just hit. Because Ana de Armas is like 5'2", so but it's funny because that's the big reveal, and then you're left with what's left is she's drinking out of Harlan's coffee cup, which is like my house, my rules, or whatever it says on it. And she's sort of standing there in her mansion watching all of these people and like, you can all leave now. It's awkward. And Jamie Lee Curtis gets some kind of note that reveals that her husband's cheating, but it goes by so fast you don't get to read it. So I don't know why that was even there. I don't get it.
Well, I think it was just to prove the point because her husband willingly gives her the note because he doesn't think Harlan had time to write it because it's a blank letter in an envelope. He thinks Harlan was just threatening it. And there was a throwaway line earlier where Jamie Lee Curtis revealed that her father and her used to communicate with invisible ink. So when she opens this envelope, she smirks to herself, seeing it's empty, and lights a match, and all of a sudden the writing is revealed. So I think it was just a nice callback, like, oh, Harlan covered that base too. He revealed to his daughter, like, your husband's a scumbag. You should essentially leave him. Like, yes. I don't think it mattered so much what was in the note. It's just like, Harlan got the last jump on her husband too.
Yeah, but what's great is they all turn around to look at her, and Jamie Lee Curtis flicks that cigarette in the ground, and it's like, now what? And it's a pure cinematography juxtaposition. This woman who is lesser than all of them is now standing high above all of them, and that's where we leave it. And I'm like, oh, it's a little subtle as a brick, but it's good too.
It was the perfect note to end on for this film. I think I really liked it.
Yeah, well, I think we're at the part of the podcast, Anthony, where it's time to give final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So, what are yours for Knives Out?
If you're looking for a mystery film you want to get lost in, that you want to put down your phone and cut everything else around you out, which is so rare for a movie to do nowadays, especially mystery films where they're dime a dozen, this is a film for you. You can't beat the cast. The writing is incredible. And it's fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Like, it's not a drama. It's truly a comedy. It's a mystery comedy, and it will keep you engaged and laughing the entire time. And you'll leave it wanting to see as many sequels as Netflix is sure to produce and milk the cow on and drain the cow on. I give this an extra large popcorn, ton of salt and butter. I loved it. I'll revisit it again. I'm excited for the sequel, especially, have you seen the cast thing they've been announcing? He's putting together another stellar cast. And yeah, Catherine Hahn, who is another underrated actress that I love. Like, I'm so glad she's I'm hoping it turns into a starring vehicle for her to piggyback off WandaVision, because I'm so excited. Can't recommend this movie enough, though. Extra large popcorn, all the trappings.
Yeah, I absolutely love this movie, if for nothing more than it is unbelievably cute and fun. And I think you said it perfectly, Anthony. If you just need 2 hours to forget all this other stuff waves to the world around us, and you just want to get lost in something, it's so rare to find a movie that can let you do that doesn't ask you to accept a lot of stuff. That's like, how can a man fly with a rocket pack on his back? And is that a god from another world with lightning? Like, if it doesn't ask you to do that, right? And this movie lives very much in a real world, and a real lived in place with real complicated, messed up people that we can all relate to, whether we grew up around them or they're in our own family or whatever. This is your movie. And it's fun. It's fun that it doesn't treat the audience like it needs to lead you through everything. They're going to tell you everything you need to know, but you don't feel insulted by that. It's actually part of the fun of the game of it. And the fun thing about this movie for me is trying to introduce it to other people who didn't watch it or missed it. I've told probably a dozen people about it this week. Like, you need to go watch this. Just put your phone down and watch it and just let it wash over you. And what you'll walk out of it going like, that's like just laying in the pool for an hour. You didn't really swim. You didn't get much sun, but you got nice and refreshed. And it's a cool, refreshing refreshing moment from a hot day. So this one for me is an extra large popcorn, ton of fun, high recommend. And I'm with you. I'm in for the sequel. I can't wait to see what they're going to do. That group of people that they've already cast is, I was sold with Edward Norton, Catherine Hahn, and Dave Bautista. I'm like, okay, let's see what happens with that, because that's going to be just wild. And I'm excited for this, and I'm also excited that Rian Johnson's been able to get past all the Star Wars hate that he had to absorb for years, because he did something different. And the thing I'll say about him as a filmmaker is, much like Soderbergh, he has a vision and a style that puts his stamp on something, so it's his kind of movie. And I'm excited to see what he does next. So this one's a strong recommend for me too, man.
Well, it's like you just said, he did something different. And in Hollywood nowadays, everything's a remake and adaptation of superhero film. That in and of itself is different and refreshing and worth checking out alone. This was actually the year it came out, I think, my favorite film that released that year. This and another surprise film that really surprised me, Ready or Not. I don't know if you've seen that film.
I know that one. Yeah.
So, I really enjoyed that one too. And again, that was another rich family, but with a horror spin on it. And
there's always fun stuff. I recommend you with that one too. Well, Anthony, again, tell folks how they can follow Tis the Podcast and all the cool stuff y'all got going on.
Yeah. So again, Tis the Podcast, the year-round Christmas podcast. You can find us at www.tizthepodcast.com and wherever you download podcasts. And Jay has been on a few times, both Patreon and the main show. Him and Ron are coming on the main show in October to discuss Paranormal Activity, whichever one was set at Christmas.
Ghost Dimension, that would be the last one. Yeah.
Ghost Dimension. So that'll be a lot of fun. So it's just a fun podcast. Lots of cool people come on and guest star and guest host, and we're a fun, active community, geeky community that may be centered on Christmas, but we talk about everything. So
the best part about it is, and I cannot emphasize this enough, folks, if you're listening to this show, thank you, and support independent podcasts like Tis the Podcast and Atkins Undisputed and Dana Buckler Show and Film Strip, things like that, because no offense, celebrities, you had something. You didn't need to come take podcasts from us too. I mean, if you listen to those, fine, I'm happy for you, but support independent podcasts, because that's where you find so much fun in a community. And you've had April Riley on your show. I've had her on Film Strip. She's a blast. She's a great follow on Twitter. She and I get to talk wrestling on the side too, which is a lot of fun. And so support independent podcasts like Tis the Podcast. I'm a proud Patreon supporter, and I don't do that for a lot of shows, but I do it for y'all because it's a good time. And so
well, we appreciate that. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, always a lot of fun. So, well, folks, again, thanks for listening to this episode of Film Strip. You can find all of our extensive archives, 300 plus episodes now, filmstrippodcast.com. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google, you name it. It's out there, all the episodes, some with much more long plot summaries than this one, out there for you to peruse. You can keep up with the show's social media at Film Strip Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and find out about upcoming shows on every other week release now. We appreciate your support. So for Anthony and Tis the Podcast, I'm Jay. Thank you for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.